Howdy folks, how's it going? As my playthrough of Old School RuneScape is evolving, I'm about to finish editing episode 9 today, but I have way more episodes than that banked. I don't want to give away exactly how many, but just know that as I record this, I am really far ahead. Today is September 21st, 2019. The episode I'm publishing is from within like the first week of me playing or something. So I wanted to go over about 3 things about the playthrough now, and you're going to see me figure those things out over the coming sets of videos. So first off, there's some controversy this week surrounding OSBuddy. That's actually what's inspiring me to make this video. OSBuddy is a third-party client that I used when I first started playing. If you haven't heard, the problem is that OSBuddy is adding increasingly questionable plugins that are moving away from just basic quality of life conveniences and moving into the territory of full-on automation. And I want to clarify that I do not endorse any of this. Before I did my first stream of the game, I was kind of dismayed to learn that I couldn't run the vanilla client in full screen. Usually I need that for my capture setup for stream. So after doing some quick research, I learned that OSBuddy could basically solve that problem. I hadn't run into RuneLite, or the people that I talked to who had played RuneScape before weren't aware of RuneLite when I did my initial research. So I started playing the game a lot, and I banked about 21 episodes before I finally got wind that OSBuddy was a little sketchy and that the open source alternative RuneLite was preferred by the community. So at the time of this recording, I've been using RuneLite for many weeks, but the first 21 banked episodes all happen to be in OSBuddy, and I just wanted to make it very clear that while I'm releasing new episodes, those new episodes are all in OSBuddy. I think episode 9 is coming out soon, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way up through 21. Those are all in OSBuddy, but those were recorded over a month ago, and I've since moved on. I'm in RuneLite now. I do not endorse OSBuddy at all, or their current practices of adding automation plugins to the game. Those plugins weren't in there when these episodes were recorded. Okay. The second thing that I wanted to cover is my so-called Tin Man rule set as it applies to this playthrough. So most old school RuneScape content creators are veterans of this game, so they can kind of set up the playthrough they want to do, they can set the rules of the playthrough, and they can get all this in stone long before they create their characters. Swampledic's rules for going into Mauritania and not leaving are very clearly set out in episode 1. He has some exceptions, but he knows what those exceptions are from the beginning. But as a brand new blind player, I have to try to figure out things as I go along. Episode 9 is coming up soon, and at this point in the playthrough, I still haven't completely nailed down how I want to play and what my restrictions are. Well, talking to you from the future, I have figured out those specifics. I do know the game pretty well right now, and I wanted to go over the specifics of that rule set here, so you know that any actions I take in upcoming videos will end up conforming to these rules. As you watch the videos, you're going to see my take on that evolve into this final form that I'm going to share with you now. So, let's see. My driving philosophy is that I dislike trading in multiplayer games, or at least I dislike huge market-driven trading like on a grand exchange or something like Diablo 3's auction house. I think if you have a limited community of people that you can share items with, that's not that big of a deal. But when you have this giant auction house, that takes a lot of the enjoyment out of the game for me. Because for me, it starts as this kind of mild quality of life convenience, but it quickly puts the player in a position where instead of playing the whole game, you're simply weighing the opportunity cost of every action that you do. So like I remember back in Diablo 3 Vanilla, I was really excited for the auction house because trading and bartering in Diablo 2 was awful, but I quickly realized while playing Diablo 3 that it was way more efficient to play the auction house than it was to play the game. And if you've watched my playthrough to this point, you've seen that I found a pretty good method for collecting money. I go and collect these swamp toads from the Tree Gnome Stronghold. What I don't want the playthrough to evolve into or devolve into is me saying, well, converting swamp toads to materials for other skills is way more efficient than leveling those skills myself, so I'm just going to collect swamp toads for 200 hours until I find something more efficient to do. I don't want that to happen. I think that's boring. I don't think I would enjoy the game if I did it that way. However, when we first started the playthrough, I didn't happen to roll an Iron Man. Since it was blind, I wasn't really sure. I figured it would be safer to roll a normal character. And honestly, I think that if I had rolled an Iron Man, it would have taken what is already shaping up to be a 500 or 600 hour playthrough to get the quest cape and made it nearly twice as long. So I'm not an Iron Man, but I don't want to buy from the Grand Exchange. I've made a compromise that I'm calling Tin Man, where I follow some restrictions on what I can and can't obtain from other players. I kind of want to go into how this Tin Man playthrough is going to work. So the general philosophy that's driving the Tin Man rule set is do not skip content. Before I make any decisions around items, I'm going to ask, does taking this item this way involve skipping content? If the answer is yes, then I need to find a way to deal with that problem. So as a result, buying items on the Grand Exchange is very discouraged. If I'm able to earn something myself, I should try to do that. The way I'm handling it, though, is that if I do have to buy something on the Grand Exchange, if it's gating a lot of content and doing the grinding to earn it myself would take a really long time, I'm setting a basic requirement that if I buy something, I have to earn it conventionally, and then sell it back to the Grand Exchange before the playthrough ends. So that means that I can borrow an item from the future version of me and then pay it back when my skills and unlocks allow me to do so in a way that doesn't take up nearly as much time. I can earn these items back any way an Iron Man could earn them back. So I could craft them myself, or I could find them in the world as drops, or I could buy them from in-game vendors. There's been a lot of hemming and hawing in the past few episodes, if you've been watching them leading up to episode 9, where I bought a mithril armor set pretty early on in order to be able to complete Priest in Peril, because that unlocked some more agility content. And then I was like, I need to get to 68 smithing so I can pay these back. And I didn't really think about the fact that, you know, the mithril items that I purchased might drop from monsters that I had the capacity to defeat, or they might be purchasable from shops. So that sort of thing I figure out later. You don't have to worry too much about me grinding to 68 smithing over the next 10 episodes. But for example, I buy a lot of the runes. I buy a lot of runes that I need from the Grand Exchange early on so I can train magic without spending too much money. But eventually I want to earn all of those myself, either by rune crafting them, which sounds awful, or from purchasing them from vendors and paying them back to the GE and just, you know, eating the cost in gold of saying, hey, I borrowed some money from myself back when it was hard for me to make money. In the late game, when I'm more efficient at making money, I'll just go to a rune shop, buy all the stuff that I've already purchased, and then sell it back. So how I'm going to do that? I've actually made a tracker for this purpose. I've blacked out a lot of the information here because they contain spoilers. But as you can see, I've started tracking every item I've ever purchased, and I've started tracking items that I've already repaid, so stuff that I've already earned myself and sold back to the Grand Exchange. You can also see items that I still have an outstanding debt on. The plan is to get to the final quest before the quest cape, and then make sure every item in this list is set to repaid before I finish the playthrough. At that point, I should be able to do all the tasks to repay everything in a way that's time efficient for the playthrough. So I am tracking all of this. I got all of this data out of OSBuddy and eventually RuneLite, which tracks all of your Grand Exchange purchases and sales. And at some point in the playthrough, after I make this spreadsheet, every time I buy something, and I go and immediately add it to this spreadsheet. So this is accurate. This shows exactly what I've bought. Because I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but just to give you an idea, if you look in the quantity column there, one of those things, I bought 7,400 of it. That's a rune that I needed. I bought 7,400 runes, and I'm going to eventually earn all those runes myself and pay them back. Now, over the part of the reason I wanted to record this is that over the next few episodes from episode 9 on, when I haven't really figured out these restrictions specifically, you're going to see me hem and haw a bit about the restrictions and figure out exactly what it is that I'm doing. But let me tell you here from the distant future that I am 100% committing to paying back every item we ever purchase on the Grand Exchange. I have a perfect log of those purchases. It is going to happen. So even if you hear me say, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm going to bail on this restriction thing, maybe this is too much, maybe mild spoilers, maybe pure essences are too cancer and farming my own pure essences is awful, so maybe I'm just going to buy them and let it go. No, we're not going to do that. If I buy pure essences at any point, I'm going to pay them back. It's going to happen. Okay, so next up, since I'm not actually an Iron Man, I feel like I should take advantage of that, and I have. Selling stuff on the Grand Exchange for me is completely unrestricted. Money's a lot less useful when you can't use it to buy stuff on the Grand Exchange, but there are still a lot of gold sinks in the game like construction, and the Iron Man methods for gathering gold are brutally slow compared to what you can get for things on the Grand Exchange. So selling stuff to GE also doesn't really represent skipping content. If we weren't able to, we just have to find the most efficient in-game method of generating gold and selling stuff to vendors. And in this case, I think it actually opens more gold obtaining methods and more content than what would be available to an Iron Man. So I'm not just going to be an Iron Man that's not an Iron Man. I'm okay with selling stuff to the GE. I don't think that breaks the philosophy of don't skip content. Also, kind of on that subject, items that are dropped by other players are fair game because as long as they're not skipping content, it's not that big of a deal. It's just speeding things up a little bit. So, like, if I'm in a dungeon fighting enemies and picking up their drops, and someone else is fighting the same enemies and leaving drops on the ground, I'm not really hurting anything if I go and pick up some of the bones, because I'm fighting those enemies too, I'm getting those bones. Nothing's really being skipped there. But if someone were to drop a really important endgame piece of gear or a bit of crafting equipment that I'm otherwise unable to access yet, then that is not fair game. I don't fully land on that specific plan until a few more episodes into the series, so if you've seen me pick up something I haven't unlocked yet, like molten glass, rest assured that I eventually do make all of those things myself. And finally, kind of unrelated to the GE restrictions, I wanted to talk a bit about research and how my approach to research has evolved over the blind playthrough. So when I play games on the live stream, I want to be as blind as possible. I want to know nothing about the game. I want to bumble my way through it, figure everything out as I go. Normally I'm streaming games, and streaming on Twitch can be nice because I can often ask chat to give me non-spoiler or light spoiler hints to get me back on the right track whenever I get stuck. So generally playing a game blind doesn't have a big impact on how long I take to beat it. There's some games that, like the how long to beat estimate, doesn't assume that you're blind. Resident Evil is one, for example, where like being good at Resident Evil and beating it on time basically means that you know where everything is and you know how to efficiently use your resources. But for most games, if I play it blind, it doesn't make me take very much longer to beat it. It might add an hour or two to the total playthrough. But from where I sit here in the future, the Quest Cave looks like it's going to be a 500 to 600 hour endeavor at the least. And if I were to play the game truly blind, that could easily double or triple to, 1,000 or 1,500 hours. In this case, especially since I don't have a stream audience to feed me minimal spoiler hints, I don't think that another 500 to 600 hours of me bumbling around would be very fun to watch. So I'm going to be a bit more aggressive with my research in this game than I would be with other blind playthroughs. Now, I'm still trying to avoid reading ahead. I don't sit on the wiki for hours when I'm not playing the game, figuring out what I want to do next. If I do research something, I'm going to do it live in the recording. You're going to hear my thoughts and everything as I discover it. I think this process of discovery is still a lot of fun to watch unfold. It's a different sort of blind playthrough because part of getting good at old school RuneScape is kind of grokking how all of its crazy systems function and which quests you should do and what's efficient and what's not efficient. So if you were playing this game, a lot of people playing this game, I imagine, would be doing research, and you're going to see me do that research, and I think that that's fun in its own way. And it's fun in its own way, and it's fun in a different way from watching me bumble for 500 hours. I will be following guides fairly closely for quests, although whenever I reach a puzzle step that I think I might be able to solve on my own, I'm going to minimize the guide and try to solve it by myself. It generally works out pretty well for discrete puzzles, but for puzzles that stretch out, over the whole map, I'm generally going to have to follow the guide pretty closely and provide my commentary on it as I go. I'm also going to be looking more closely at the training pages for skills on the wiki, just to give you an idea of expected XP rates, how they compare to one another. I'm not always going to be following the wiki's recommendation, and I'm still going to be playing with this don't skip content philosophy. So much later in the playthrough, I discovered that achievement diaries are a great way to ensure that most content isn't skipped. Even if you're leveling the skill really efficiently by picking one thing to do and doing it non-stop, doing the achievement diaries later makes sure that you see a lot of the content that you had bypassed. I think that's probably true for quests as well. Quests make you do a lot of stuff with skills that you wouldn't have done otherwise. So I'm not going to reveal the level to which I commit to completing achievement diaries, but I do want to try to do every unique task for every skill at least once before the playthrough ends. So for thieving as a quick example, although I might stick to one method for leveling thieving, I might just pickpocket the same NPC over and over for 30 levels. Before we get the quest cape, I'm going to want to go on a world tour and make sure that I've picked every pocket, picked every lock, opened every chest, and done every bit of unique content we've unlocked for thieving at least once, whether that's through achievement diaries or just for fun. So that's everything I wanted to cover. Going forward, if I have any major comments to add to these videos, I'll probably edit them in as a short little preamble to the start of the episode, as you saw in the first couple episodes. But since my use of OSBuddy, my GE restrictions, and my research policy are all a pretty big deal for the entire playthrough, I wanted to knock out this quick video to kind of go over all of that now. I hope you enjoy the rest of the playthrough, and we'll see you in episode 9, which I should be publishing tomorrow.